Somewhere in Shizuoka Prefecture. This is the middle of nowhere, and it feels like the kind of village you'd imagine as a stereotype. Surrounded by mountains, rich in nature, endless rice fields with raccoons, wild boars, deer, and monkeys all commonplace. At night, the sounds of insects and frogs are always loud, and there are hardly any streetlights. It takes more than an hour and a half by car to get to the nearest supermarket or a middle-sized town. In this rural area of my hometown, that only a select few villagers know and visit. It seems that in the past, Watanuki-sama would protect the village from disease and disasters, famine, by villagers making offerings to him. However, he is known to be a god with a bad temper. So when I did something bad as a kid, my grandparents would threaten me by saying, "Kazu, if you don't behave, Watanuki-sama will eat you." Once every few years, my grandparents still wear white clothes and perform the offering ceremony for Watanuki-sama. I was told that children were not allowed to go, so I didn't know what kind of ceremony they were doing. But I knew that the offering is always a fresh animal, such as fish, chicken, pig, or deer caught that very day. The bigger the offering is, the more Watanuki-sama will be happy and will protect the village for several years. However, there seemed to be a certain rule for this. In the ceremony, the offering must be placed in front of the shrine, and the dancers have to dance around the shrine with their backs to it. They must never look back when you do this. No matter how much they call out to you, whatever you do, you must not look back. It's said that if you make eye contact with Watanuki-sama, you will be made into an offering. The ceremony ends when Watanuki-sama finishes eating what we offered. Even as a child, I always thought it was strange. I wondered how they could know when they had finished eating, especially since they can't see gods. If animals were being eaten, surely Watanuki-sama must be a bear or something. I also wondered if it was a raccoon dog, judging from its name. Anyway, here's the main point. My grandparents also went to make offerings to Watanuki-sama. I think it was when I was in 6th grade. My grandpa told me, "I'm going to make an offering. Make sure you stay home until we get back." Of course I obeyed. That day, they came home late. I remember my parents looking a little nervous, glancing at the darkness outside the house. As expected, it was late at night when even the insects were quieting down. My parents were worried that they hadn't come home yet, so they went to check on them. A while later, we heard shouting and voices, so it must have been the end of the ceremony, and it got really noisy outside the house. I opened the sliding door in my room and took a quick look outside. Why, did it do it? It's this thing. I can't go back. It's impossible. I couldn't understand what they were saying because the voices of several people made it hard to focus on one. But I understood what they were arguing about. I noticed my grandparents were still out there, but so were the other village people and several monks from the temple. There were people I didn't even recognize. Detecting some ominous and strong entity made me feel uneasy. I tried to quietly close the door, but it made a louder squeaking noise than I expected. At that very moment, everyone's head turned towards me, noticing this artificial sound. From a quick glance, I noticed two old men from the neighborhood holding two children. my mother came running over, and they all disappeared from my field of vision. She told me with an urgent tone, "It's okay. There's nothing going on. Go to bed early." And with that, I was taken back inside the house. But I couldn't fall asleep, even in bed. How could I, after all I've seen? I pretended to be asleep and listened to what the adults were talking about. "I can't believe the kids from were here. We should have been more careful. It's good that we noticed it soon. If it was any later, it would have been all over the place." "But I wonder if it will go back to normal. It might be difficult. I can say we were lucky that it was only a mental thing." I know everyone in the village, so I knew the name of the child who was the victim. But what on earth happened to him? After deciding to ask the kid tomorrow, my mind drifted away into a sweet slumber. The next day, I asked my parents and grandparents about the day before, but they would just evade a question, changing topics and getting out of the room. So I decided to go to the kids' house, but it was empty and there was no one there. Alright, so no one can give me answers. I walked through the woods to the mountain shrine where the ceremony was held. The further I went, the thicker the vegetation became, and the air was dense with smells of mold. The sunlight was covered by the trees, and there were more rocks than roots under my feet. As I took each step, paying attention not to fall or trip, I suddenly came to an open space. There was a small shrine standing alone in the center. Being mesmerized, I was drawn to it. As I approached the building, the double doors seemed to open a little. Just a little more. Just as I reached out my hand. "Kazu! Where are you? Kazu!" I was startled by the sudden voice of an adult from behind me, so I quickly hid in the bushes nearby. No, am I going to be in trouble? After a while, several adults and monks from the village came near the shrine. They desperately seemed to be looking for something. I thought I should go back so I wouldn't be found and scolded, so I slowly moved my head. And that's when I saw a small child's hand rolling on the ground. What? The wrist was behind the trunk of a large tree. Every fiber in my body told me not to look. I immediately threw a stone that was near me in the direction of the adults, and when they were looking at the opposite direction, I ran down the mountain as fast as I could. I don't know what happened to them after that. Soon after, the child's family moved away from the village. It's been more than 50 years since that day. That's right, the name Watanuki-sama, when written in kanji, Wata means intestines and Nuki means taker. I realized that only a few years ago. It seems they haven't done any offering ceremony since that day.